Okay, so tier list time. Best decks for Legend. Highlander Hunter is number 1. It was already one of the best decks in the game, if not the best, and its biggest competitor for the number 1 spot, Demon Hunter, was just nerfed, so that's one thing, moving it up. And then also, Demon Hunter is one of its worst matchups, so it moves up even further. I think this deck is going to be absolutely unstoppable with all of the decks that are going to rise in the meta. It does well into Mage and Rogue too, which, to be quite honest with you, are the 2 decks that will probably start seeing more play. It even does well into Priest, because you can get a lot of pressure with minions that are not easy to kill. Like Evasive Feywing, Fairy Dragon can't even be targeted. All of your minions have a decent amount of health. A lot of them have 4 or higher, so the board wipe doesn't really do that much, and you have really good late game closers, so highly recommend this deck. Best deck in the game, in my opinion, by a pretty wide margin, with the next deck being pretty far behind, but definitely deserving the number 2 spot. So I would recommend crafting this one. If you want a budget version, I've already made a video on that. I will probably make another one because I think that this style of deck is really important to have, and I think the budget version of the deck is still a high tier deck. So I know on my tier list I said that Bomb Warrior was number 3 behind Spell, but I think that Bomb Warrior is actually just insane. I think that it beats pretty much everything except for Priest. Everything else this deck actually does really well into. You even have Bladestorm to deal with early things and Brawl. I've been back and forth. I've had 2 Bladestorms and 2 Brawls. I'm on a 2 Brawl phase right now, but I could easily see 2 Bladestorms being run. I don't think it really matters that much. But despite all of this, it can deal with Spell Druid relatively easily with Bladestorm or Risky Skipper to kill Glowfly Swarms, and Brawls to kill off the bigger threats. You have really good weapons with Wrench Caliber that disrupt combos, and like Rogue, you can't draw for free anymore, and it disrupts Highlander. It also disrupts Skull of Gul'dan as well. Then you have Blastmaster Boom as a big win condition, some closeout potential with Grommash, but if you don't want to run Grommash and you want to run Kergath, that actually works as well. I actually think that Grommash is better right now because I think Priest got a little bit of a buff and you want to have at least a win condition. But if the meta becomes a little more aggressive, you can run Blade Fist again, and then you have really solid removal at the end with Deathwing. You can run, instead of Captain Greenskin, you can run the Horde Pillager as well to re-equip the weapon. I think that making a weapon stronger is better, especially considering weapon removal is going to be seen a little bit less because Demon Hunter is going to be played less, and as a result, Warrior will probably be played a little bit less as well. So this deck is a pretty solid number 2. It counters the number 1 deck in the game, which is Highlander Hunter. I just went over that. It does well into Spell Druid, which is the next highest, and it does well into all other Highlander decks and Rogue. It does well into everything, except Priest, so I'd try it out if you haven't already. It's not super expensive. I came out with a budget version that did pretty well. I think Anchor, Blastmaster Boom are both needed, and instead of these last guys, Horde Pillager, and then these 2 you can replace with maybe like Kor'kron Elite for a little of extra burst, or something along those lines, or maybe another Horde Pillagers just in general. But yeah, I have a video on a budget version of this already, so you can check that out. And yeah, deck's insane. I know I had this deck at number 2, but I think that it is actually number 3. I've played this deck a decent amount, and I really just don't like the fact that sometimes you just don't even get to play the game. I think that this deck struggles a decent amount into very hard aggro matchups. And I know that it's not going to be seen as much because Demon Hunter was nerfed, but I do still think that decks with like really good board wipe, like Warrior, like Bomb Warrior, and really good tempo, like Highlander Hunter, and even with good like late game effects like Mage, might actually just be able to beat this deck. The deck has really good tempo though if you can get the ramp. It's basically unbeatable if you can get Overgrowth, to be fair. And as long as you don't lose the Ysera, you have also one of the best late games, in my opinion, or at least surprise late games. One of the best late game plays, right? Ysera into Overflow, getting 2 or 3 big dragons out on the board can be absolutely massive. And then at the end of the game, one last Glowfly Swarm with the Soul of the Forest to push lethal with Savage Roar. You have a lot of win conditions. It's just heavily reliant on getting that ramp so you don't get rushed down, and then having one of these cards on curve so you don't get blown out. And because it's so heavily reliant on just a couple of cards, I moved it down a little bit, but I do think that it's still very good. Just hard mulligan for Overgrowth, Fungal Fortunes, and if you can, I like keeping an exotic Mount Seller. Unless it's a super aggro matchup, in which case get rid of it and look for early removal. Also, if you're struggling into early aggro because for some reason you're still playing against a lot of demon hunters, take out Worthy Expedition and put Claw back in so you can have a little bit of extra removal. And that's about it. Let's jump into the next one. I think Highlander Mage is actually in a pretty good spot. With aggro decks going down, I think that this deck actually has decent number of ways of dealing with Spell Druid. I think that this deck is actually pretty good at dealing with a lot of the other late game slower decks because of how value you can go with your late game options. I think Priest can beat it late game depending on who gets what, and if he has a lot of the removal on curve and what he discovers. Priest is very RNG based, and so is Mage. Like Box and Reno are two of your win conditions, and they're pure literally pure RNG. Like, it's crazy. But overall, very solid deck. Like I said, very heavily stacked in the late game. But if you think about it, all the stuff you have in the early game is very, very good for its role. Static Swampu's great at removing stuff. Prime, very good 2-drop that if they don't kill, you get a little bit of extra damage out of. If they do kill, you get the Prime in your deck. And the sooner you get that Prime in your deck, the sooner you can play it. So that's actually really good. Doomsayer's insane into aggro. And then Zephyrus I keep most of the time just in case I need a get out of jail free card. Turn 3, you could run this. Or you could run Flame Ward. It's not really up to... It's up to you. They're pretty much interchangeable at this point. They do the same exact thing. And then, as you go on, you have a new win condition with Conjurer's Calling, which I think is pretty solid. It gives you another mid-game thing, so if you have a Dragon Caster, you can play that if you don't have another spell. Or Malagos, if it lives for a turn, you can just Conjurer's Calling it and make it a more impactful minion. It's pretty solid. I think that the deck will struggle into Hunter, which is not good because I think Hunter's the best deck in the game and should be played the most. And it struggles into hard aggro other than Murloc Paladin. And I think that aggro will always be at least relatively played in the meta, especially with like Tempo Demon Hunter. The nerf, it was a pretty significant nerf, but I think that it's still going to see some play. So I think that Mage is going to be good, but I'm putting it at number 4 because I'm not entirely sure where it's going to go from here. So the last one is Rogue in general. I personally like Highlander Galakrond Rogue the most, but if you run Secret or Stealth Galakrond Rogue, they will all work. I put them all in the same category of Demon Hunter seeing less play, and there's less aggro in the meta right now, so you have a little bit more time to build up Invokes, build up other synergies, and get off ridiculously powerful Galakronds with Kronkses and all that stuff. I think that the deck as a whole is actually really strong, but I think that it can actually outvalue Priest late game. With all the lackeys that you generate, I think that it can actually outvalue them. You have pretty decent tempo, you have good removal, you struggle into wide boards like Spell Druid, which is why I threw a Waste Warden in there. It's the same reason I threw it in there for Highlander Hunter. And then you also have some good finishing potentially with like Eviscerate and Zephyrus. And that's just the Highlander deck. Obviously the other decks don't have Zephyrus, but they'll have like more aggressive stealth minions or what's it called? Or Hanar. Very good across the board. And I think that with the meta slowing down and you having a little bit more time to build up a board and not get rushed out super fast, I think that this deck will definitely be strong. You could also run a more just normal Galakrond version. If you want to see the secret Galakrond version that I have, I could show that in the description below as well. But I personally like Highlander Rogue the most. So yeah, that's about it. Those are the decks. Those are the best decks in the meta right now, in my opinion. They're also shout-out decks, Galakrond Priest and Quest Warlock. I think that both of those are good. I haven't played them very many times, and I think that they have a huge high skill cap. And Priest, I think, is actually not that good because so much of your win condition is just randomly generated minions. So because of that, I don't think that it's necessarily rated that high. That's just me. You guys can disagree, but I do think they're honorable mentions and very good decks to climb with. You also have decks like Face Hunter, Dragon Hunter, and Pirate Warrior if you want a new aggro deck, if you're going off of the Demon Hunter craze, and that's pretty much it. Again, for this Rogue deck, you can play any different Rogue, right? You can play any of them. I feel like they all are very similar in power level, just slightly different. And personally, I like Highlander Rogue the most because I absolutely love the Highlander synergies and the flexibility. But that's just me. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions or think I missed a deck, please put it in the description, or not description, comments. I'd be happy to converse with you. And I'll see you in the next video. See ya.